That's the magic words.
I'm gonna turn the lights off here so that the pictures show up a little bit better. That better? Yeah. Good. All right, everybody, welcome. Thank you for coming out to the Active Nature Center lecture series. I think this is really maybe our third year of having these quarterly lectures. Yeah. And it really warms my heart. Thank you that you're all interested in this subject. So thank you very much. Thank you people on Zoom for coming to hear it. And I'll tell you a little bit about myself and then we'll get started. I'm a 15-year Texas Master Naturalist with the Rio Brazos chapter. That's the chapter that covers Hood County, Somerville County, and Johnson County. And I'm a board member of the Friends of Active Nature Center. I'm a photographer, I'm an artist, and I'm a long-time birder and a nature enthusiast. I live in Pond Plantation and first moved to Granbury in 1987. In those 37 years, we have seen a lot of change here in Hood County. I'm also a concerned citizen, and I'm worried about the fate of the planet, and I'm trying to do something to help. There are many problems that are facing us today. They're so immense, and I simply can't talk about all those problems today. But I'm not an expert, but what I can do is point out one problem that has some very homeowner-friendly solutions, things that we all can do. I'm going to be talking about the pollinator troubles, and I'm going to show you some ways and describe what I've been doing as an example for my talk. This presentation was inspired by two presentations that were given at this lecture series back in January and April of 2023. They were given by Dr. Billy Teals. I don't know if any of you were able to see those presentations. They were on restoring his backyard, his yard, to what used to be a native short and tall grass prairie. And you can still see those lectures if you'd like to. If you go to the Active Nature Center website, we have a link to a YouTube, so those are still available to you. But I was very inspired by his presentations. But his yard and our yard have very different considerations. His yard was originally land that was the native prairie. I'm at the Pond Plantation. I'm in a bottomland environment. We're circled by the river. And I'm on a it's 0.85 tenths of an acre, much different situation. So my emphasis has been on building pollinator farms. Please feel free, if you want to take pictures of any of the slides, go right ahead and do it. I have references that I'm happy to share. You can take pictures of the slides, or at the end, I have them all on one piece of paper over there to take a picture of that, or I have some handouts of that if you would like to take that with you. There are lots of photos in this presentation. Most of them are mine. Where they are not, I've given credit to the photographers up on the slide. Okay, these are the topics that we're going to be covering.
If they can advance the slide. Wake up the computer, sorry.
That's all right. Four different main topics. First, we'll talk about what are pollinators. Then, why are they important? How do they need our help? And why do they need our help? And how can we help? What is a pollinator? A pollinator is anything that helps carry pollen from the male part of the flower, the stamen, to the female part of the flower, the stigma.
Excellent.
The movement of pollen must occur for the plant to become fertilized and produce fruits, seeds, and young plants. Pollinators are bees, wasps, butterflies, moths, birds, flies, beetles, and some mammals like monkeys, marsupials, rabbits, deer, rodents, and even some kinds of lizards. Ruffed lemurs may be the largest pollinators, known to pry open the tough flowers of the traveler's tree for a nectar treat on their native island of Madagascar.
Oh, we got that one.
Bats
Oh, wow.
You may need to
Yeah.
mute them.
So could, those of you on Zoom, could you mute your, I would appreciate it.
Bats pollinate about 500 species of plants. Many species of bats eat nectar. Nectar feeding helps a variety of plants because as the bats feed, the pollen attaches to their fur and then they pollinate plants. Around 500 species of flowering plants rely on bat pollination. And those are the plants that often open their flowers at night. Lemurs, possums, squirrels, marsupials visit at least 85 plant species worldwide. Birds pollinate at least 10,000 plant species worldwide. The group of animals who do the bulk of pollination are the insects. It's estimated that at least 75% of flowering plants on Earth are pollinated by insects and other animals. That's about 1,200 food crops. 180,000 different species of plants. Bees are especially adapted to pollination. They're usually fuzzy and have an electrostatic charge. So when they enter a flower looking for nectar and pollen, the pollen sticks to them and is brushed off on other flowers as they forage. Okay, why are they important? In ecology, the term keystone species is used to describe a species on which other species of the ecosystem depend, either directly or indirectly, and whose removal would prompt a dramatic change in an ecosystem. The wolf, for example, is a keystone species because it controls populations of herbivores, deer, elk, rabbits, that consume the various plants in turn supporting numerous species, including birds and insects. The loss of a keystone species has effects at many levels in an ecosystem. Pollinators are considered keystone species, because they are responsible for the pollination of many important flowering plants. The results of their labor, seeds, nuts, fruits, are the primary source of nourishment for many birds, mammals, including us, and insects. If fewer plants receive adequate pollination, less food will become available for animals. Pollinators are also considered indicator species. Their presence, abundance, and health can provide insight into the health of an entire ecosystem. A diverse and healthy pollinator community will support a variety of plants and thus the rest of the environment. Biodiversity. Pollinators are essential in keeping entire ecosystems functioning and for keeping up biodiversity. Biodiversity is extremely important. Any ecosystem with diverse species is able to provide the most eco services. Ecosystem services are the goods and services provided by those ecosystems to humans. That term refers to the services that are for us. Examples of eco services are the natural pollination of crops, clean air, decomposition of wastes, extreme weather mitigation, and human mental and physical well-being. In a biodiverse system, everything is connected. Here are some examples of animals that rely on pollinators. Moose feed on willows, mountain ash, and serviceberry, cranberries. Willows need insect pollinators. American mountain ash and serviceberry benefit from cross-pollination. Cranberries are not capable of self-fertilization. For almost all species of bears, pollinators provide an important part of their diet, either directly as the insects and the larvae, or by pollinating the plants that produce the fruit, nuts, roots, and leaves and seeds that they eat. Staple food for game animals like whitetail and mule deer include nuts and acorns. Elk graze on elkweed that is pollinated by bees, flies, butterflies, and moths. Grouse, pheasants, wild turkey, and quail depend on seeds and fruits from pollinated flowers. Adults and larvae of pollinators, including butterflies, moths, flies, beetles, bees, and wasps, are eaten directly by birds. Nesting birds feed their nestling insect larvae, crucial to the survival of their young. Young turkeys eat insects from the time they hatch. Native plants provide essential shelter, cover, and nesting sites for game birds and mammals. Freshwater fish eat flies, beetles, wasps, bees, butterflies, and other pollinators in their diet. The bulk of plants need pollinators. Although there are many species that can self-pollinate or are pollinated by the wind, many important food crops need pollinators. As you look at this list of food crops that we eat, you can see by this list how many need animal pollinators. Pollinators are not only essential for wildlife, but definitely for us as well. Without pollinators, these crops will dwindle in productivity. I know it's a busy slide, and it may be hard to see all those little which insects are pollinating these plants, but it does demonstrate how many of our food sources need pollinators. For example, I love blueberries on my cereal. Over 115 kinds of bees, including bumblebees, mason bees, mining bees, and leafcutter bees, pollinate blueberries. Bananas are pollinated by birds and fruit bats. And think about dairy products. Dairy cows eat alfalfa, pollinated by leafcutter and honeybees. Next. These are more foods that need pollinators. Not all pollinators are bees, and certainly not just honeybees. The other pollinators for these crops are wasps, flies, birds, moths, bumblebees, mason bees, solitary bees, honeybees, bats, and other insects. Why do they need our help? If pollinators decline, then so does pollination. If pollination isn't happening, these plants will produce less fruit, seeds, and nuts. The reduction in these foods would have a huge impact on human populations. I'm going to talk about some of the ways the pollinators are in trouble. Some of these are habitat loss, non-native species, invasive species, pesticides, climate change, and parasites and diseases. Habitat loss. Pollinators require natural spaces with vegetation and flowering plants to forage for nectar and pollen. The main causes of habitat loss are agriculture, mining, human development. Native vegetation has been replaced with concrete, shopping centers, roadways, parking lots, and just as bad, manicured lawns. Overuse of pesticides is common in these areas. What native lands are left are fragments of the original. Fragmented habitat may be too small to meet the needs of the pollinators. The remaining patches of meadows and prairies have become disconnected from each other, making it more difficult for pollinators to reach new breeding sites or find better habitat. Migratory species of pollinators face additional challenges. If the distances between suitable habitat sites along their migratory paths are too far apart, then fewer individuals end up completing the migration. Non-native species. And this is just a small list of them. And some of them you'll find surprising because they're used constantly in our urban landscaping and our suburban landscaping because they're so adaptive and they really do so well. In North America, plant species are generally described as native if they occurred here prior to European settlement. There's a lot of debate on how people define a native species, but that's the one we'll be using. This distinction is made because of the large-scale changes that have occurred since the arrival of the European settlers. Native plants play an essential role in maintaining the biodiversity of an ecosystem. Native species are natural to the area where they are found and are specially adapted to that particular ecosystem. Without them and the insects that co-evolve with them, local birds can't survive. Research by the entomologist Doug Tallamy has shown that native oak trees excuse me, support over 500 species of caterpillars, whereas ginkgos, a commonly planted landscape tree from Asia, host only 5 species of caterpillars. When it takes over 6,000 caterpillars to raise one brood of chickadees, one brood, that's a significant difference. Around here, they can breed 2 or 3 times in 1 year. Pollinators require specific plants which provide nutrition and habitat to the larvae, the immature stages, and adult pollinators. 90% of native insects, like butterfly caterpillars, can only eat plants that they've co-evolved with for thousands of years. Introduced species of pollinators may compete with native pollinators for pollen and nectar. All plants are native to some region. Some non-native species here are beneficial for food and resources to society and never become invasive. An invasive plant is one that is capable of moving aggressively into a habitat and monopolizing resources such as light, nutrients, water, and space to the detriment of other species. Like, look at that kudzu. No light can get underneath that. What's going to grow under there? Invasive plants often come from other countries. Some species, though, may be native to certain regions of the U.S. When transported to other locations in the country, they become invasive. We're such a big country that physically we're so big that what works well in that particular environment is just very detrimental in another. Invasive species aggressively compete with native species and are often the victor in those battles. When an invasive species outcompetes many native species, biodiversity can be reduced. Invasives are successful because since they're introduced here, they have no or few natural predators. They're ahead of the game in survival. Some are allelopathic, which means they produce biochemicals that negatively influence other plants' germination, growth, survival, reproduction. China berry trees and tree of heaven do that. Many create dense shade, shading out other plants. Extended growing seasons in their new environment allow more growth, and that consequently uses up more of the resources. And a lot of them thrive on disturbed land, which we have a lot of that. Pesticides, big problem. Improper use of pesticides can harm pollinators. In addition to killing insects or weeds, those pesticides can be toxic to birds, fish, and other non-target plants. They just can't make them specific to one thing. Pesticides include the herbicides, insecticides, and fungicides. Pesticides can affect pollinators directly, and sometimes the pesticides may remain in the environment for an extended time and affect multiple generations of pollinators. Insecticides applied to plant seeds may, when the plant is mature, contaminate pollen grains that are then a source of food for pollinators killing them. Insecticides that don't directly kill may hamper the ability of pollinators to navigate or forage. Seems to be a lot of that with the navigation with the honeybees. That's one of the theories there from pollen clouds. Herbicides may kill important forage plants for pollinators. This is a special class of those, of the insecticides. These are neonicotinoids. Scientists have been raising the alarm on neonicotinoids. They're also commonly known as neonics. Let's try saying neonicotinoids 3 times really fast. They are the most widely used class of insecticides and have had devastating ecological impacts. A lot of research still going on this topic. They're very toxic to pollinators, to beneficial insects, and aquatic invertebrates. They are highly toxic in small quantities to bees. Because they're systemic chemicals, they are absorbed into the plants. They can get into the nectar and pollen, which can make them toxic to the pollinators. They are long-lasting in plants, so they can harm pollinators months after application. Just by the way, organic farmers are not allowed to use them. And they are being banned in certain applications in many states right now. Climate change. Dr. George Diggs is a research associate at BRIT. That's the Botanical Institute in Fort Worth. They are up there with the Botanical Gardens, great institute. He's an evolutionary biologist and he's professor of biology at Boston College. And he says we may lose some endemic plant species and pests in the future. Endemic species are species that are found in a very particular geographic location and nowhere else in the world. He said one example, that's that picture up there, is the American beech tree that thrives in cooler locations, but it still grows in some milder spots in East Texas. As temperatures rise, it will disappear from the big thicket in East Texas. And when you lose a plant species like that, it can greatly affect the whole chain that depends on it for food. With the climate changing, flowers are blooming earlier as temperatures warm, costing some pollinators the opportunity to feed. Some insects feed only on specific plants. If they bloom too soon and the blooms die before the insects arrive, the timing is mismatched. The insects go hungry and fewer plants get pollinated. Climate change is producing more flooding, wildflowers, and the spread of the invasive species, threatening native habitats. This may directly affect pollinators if the host plant that a pollinator needs to survive is overtaken by another plant species. Flowering plants may occur farther north or at higher elevations as a response to the warming temperatures and may become out of sync with their pollinators. The types and distribution of pollinators may change. Pollinators adapted to warmer temperatures may expand their northward range, displacing other pollinators. One effect, which some of you may have already noticed this one, of climate change is the hardiness zone maps that we use to know when to plant our tomatoes and our vegetables that we've been using for years have been changing over the past 25 years. If you look at those old maps, they're not in the same zone. Another effect of climate change has to do with parasites and diseases. Plant diseases are one of the leading causes of crop failure worldwide. As the climate heats up, countries closer to the poles will eventually become conducive enough for more pathogens to settle in and wreak havoc on those crops. Local farmers in developing countries closer to the tropics may suffer more than others if they're not prepared to deal with the new pathogens. Increasing temperatures help the development of arthropod vectors that carry many parasites. Disease-causing organisms, including viruses, fungi, and bacteria, can spread from non-native to native pollinators. Next. If you were alive in the year 1970, I was, more than 1 in 4 birds in the United States and Canada has disappeared within your lifetime. That's 3 billion fewer birds in 50 years. This information alone is alarming and should make us question why. Pollinators are not the only ones in trouble. The loss of plants means less pollinators, so less caterpillars to feed the birds. The loss of plants also means less seeds, the seed eaters, less places to shelter, and nesting materials. This woven quilt of ours is unraveling. So, how can we help? We have big problems on our hands, but there are solutions that we as individuals can take on. This is my first suggestion. It's called Nature's Best Hope, and it's a book by Douglas Bellamy. It's a superb book that he's written, and it's inspirational, it's hopeful, it provides a plan that each homeowner or your renter with a patio or a balcony can apply to help create the interconnected habitat needed to restore plant and pollinator communities. He's a professor at the University of Delaware. His book outlines his vision for a grassroots approach to conservation that he calls Homegrown National Park. I'm on the Homegrown National Park right now, and part of this grassroots that he's talking about. And I have all that information there. Each of our yards can be part of a larger mosaic that can eventually be interconnected to help sustain biodiversity. And even if these are not all interconnected physically, you can think about your own neighborhood. If every third or fourth yard was part of that, butterflies can go between those properties. It becomes interconnected. They can be interconnected to help sustain biodiversity. He says that by focusing on plants that are the larval host plants for pollinators like moths, butterflies, and bees, our landscape will produce lots of caterpillars. Caterpillars are relatively large, he said. They're soft and more nutritious than most other insects. Most of North America's land birds rear their young on insects rather than the berries and seeds that they'll eat as adults. He also focuses on native bees that are crucially important. Of the 4,000 species of native bees, only bumblebees, 46 species, have tiny hives, unlike the hive, big colony bees like the imported European bees. The rest are solitary, never aggressively defend a home space. Okay. Here's my approach. You all have a starting point. I started by assessing what I already had on my property. When you go about thinking about what you want to do, you just have to look at your property and say, well, what do I already have? What do I need? What can I do? This is a drawing of our property. I told you I live on plantation and I live in the airport. My husband Dave here built an airplane, so we needed a hangar. And you'll notice the relative size of the hangar footprint to the house, and we might begin to see some of our priorities. The hangar's a little bigger than the house. It's the whole property is 0.85 of an acre. It's got the house, it's got the double garage, it's got the hangar, there's a paved driveway. This is the front of the house here. Can't plant in my easement. There's a grass taxiway that runs back here. I can't plant on that. And then there's a paved taxiway that connects the other neighbors with their taxiways. So you can see what's left is this area that I can plant, what I can do there. Now, because I live in a pecan plantation, I lucked out. I have 11 pecan trees. I love harvesting my pecans. I like eating them. So I knew right away, I'm not getting rid of my pecan trees. I also love the shade. I can't imagine why anyone would want to cut down a gorgeous shade tree in Texas if they didn't have something to replace it with. I also really lucked out. The people who owned the house before me planted these 3 plants right here, the circles. Those are bur oaks. And I'll tell you more about oaks in a little bit, but that's a keystone species. And I have 2 that are double trunked and one's that's a single trunk, and they're big and they're beautiful. More shade. There were already 2 redbuds right here. And then there was this little line of crepe myrtles, which I took out. They're not native. And they were also planted in a little tiny bed like this. And they just were in the way when you drove in the driveway. Just they weren't suitable. So I thought I'll go with something. Right now, that's where my potted herb garden is. And then there was another crepe myrtle out here, which I took out. And then there were some mandatas, and those were invasive. So I went ahead and I removed those. But there are 2 non-native plants that I have not moved yet. The one back here, the little box there, I think it's a Russian thorny olive. When I first moved in, I wanted to get my yard certified by National Wildlife Federation, and one of the things they want you to do is have year-round shelter for animals. And that was the only plant that kept its leaves all year round. I've since added more. But it's also the very last plant that blooms in the fall in my yard, and it's covered with bees and insects. So I'm not ready to yoink it and put something else in. And then the other thing that was there, right there is I think it's a budalia, and it gets covered with insects. And I kind of want to put a red oak in there, but unless I'm ready to do it, I don't see any reason to pull that out yet. So the rest of my yard was true. So I have all this shade, I still have a lot of sun, and I have those things to consider when I think about, okay, what do I want to plant? It can be shade, it can be part shade, it can be sun. So I had a fair amount of options. Some people may have, maybe they just moved into a new place and there's nothing there. They've got all the options in plenty plants and then not too much in the shade. So you just have to consider your own circumstances in that. And because I live in Pecan and I'm surrounded by the Brazos River, I'm in a bottomland environment. So I'm not looking at trying to put in prairie grasses and do those things. I'm really focusing my bit on the pollinator garden. So that's my starting place. Next. Right from the very beginning in my planning, I knew that I wanted to take being a good neighbor very seriously. I live in a gated community. I don't want to rub my neighbors the wrong way. I want to be a good neighbor. And I do this several ways. One, I make my garden beds look intentional by lining them with the bricks. So it doesn't look haphazard or that I forgot to mow that part of my yard. Because sometimes the flowers aren't blooming, but if people know it's a garden, they might understand that. And when I'm out there, I get a lot of butterflies because my garden's becoming more mature. People stop to look and I talk to them and I tell them what I'm doing, explain all these kind of things. And in this picture, you can see some of the things that I picked. I have black-eyed Susans and bee balm that grow together well right there. And then this right here is a coral honeysuckle. And it's just one plant, but it's gotten huge and it's now one of those year-round shelters that I have. So that's very nice. Okay, next. Another thing I do to make it look would be helpful for my neighbors to wonder what am I doing is I hang my National Wildlife Federation certification sign out here, and I'm happy to talk to anybody about that, what I'm doing. And then I put little garden flags out too. If it says pollinator garden, I think that helps explain. And it doesn't leave as many questions. So what I try to do is just make it as pretty as I can and invite people to ask me questions. All right, some more choices that I made. That's the same map. And what I've done in the red is I've put in additional gardens. Now, right behind the house, this right here, that little square is my vegetable garden. And I had to fence that because I don't know how many of you live in Pecan, but there are about 1 billion deer there. And the only way I can keep my vegetables from not being eaten is to have that, although it's starting to become taken over with native flowers. Then you see these other red gardens. Those are just garden beds that I've slowly removed the turf from. I just stick it out with a shovel. I make the parts a little bigger, and I plant my native flowers in those. And then those are a mixture of shade and sun. And then like this long garden here, we dug that one because I wanted fruit trees. They're not necessarily native, but that's for me. It's kind of my garden. And then I put flowers all around in that one. And then when I plant my flowers, I try to plant them in larger groups. It seems that the research shows that when the butterflies and all are attracted, they like a big patch rather than a one of each situation. And this bed and that flower, in this flower bed there, this is tropical sage, which the hummingbirds love, and sulfur butterflies. And this is blue mist. And I started with a little patch. I got some from a neighbor. And it grows and it spreads, and the queen butterflies love it all summer, and it attracts monarchs and every kind of insect I've seen on there. And I can take it and dig some up and plant it somewhere else. And now I have that on just all four sides of my house. So that when the monarchs come in, because that's a whole other story, we want monarchs to come into our yard.
What did you say those are?
Oh, blue mist, this one, blue mist.
Greg's.
Greg's blue mist, I think it might be Greggy. Yeah, Greg's blue mist, yes, Malia?
Did you just gather seeds or did you propagate the seeds and then take plant into a plant with the red food?
Okay, the question for those on Zoom is, did I propagate seeds or did I plant plants? For the blue mist, my neighbor had some. And she said, oh, come dig it up. I have way too much. And I dug up a clump of it, probably enough to do 3 feet, a circle 3 feet. And it grew well. I'm not always successful. Grew well. And then I slowly dug some up and put it somewhere else in my yard and shared it with other people. Some things I plant from seeds. I'm pretty miserable on that. I keep trying. Some of it works. Bee balm and black-eyed Susan, I grew from seed. I just scattered it, and my other successful seed is blanket flower. Came up beautifully, and it reseeds itself each year, and I haven't had any problem having that come back. And then some of my other ones, I bought maybe 2 or 3 plants and tried. I would try them. I used to try packs of 3 plants, but deer would eat them and then be like, oh, it's 3. So I try 1. And then if it works, it's a very slow process. Okay, and then this last year, I dug up some frostweed, brought it over to my house, and I planted it. It grew really well, and it must be 12 feet tall. I had noticed at the Acton Nature Center how many insects I saw and took pictures of one little time I was up there and thought, well, that's a good one. Put it in my yard, and the monarchs now are also loving it because we tag monarchs. Dave here tags monarchs for Monarch Watch, and he has tagged up to 250 in a season in our yard. Up to this year alone, just to start, 40. So anything I can do that as a nectar plant to bring monarchs, and I add those. Their monarchs aren't particularly good pollinators. It's just not what they do. Very full pollinators, as I've been told, but I love the other reasons. And then where you see the red X's, we added trees. Like in here, I've added native trees. I've added a Mexican plum, desert willow, the possum haw, the little possum haw. And then my daughter gave me seeds for, she started for me, Mexican mint. No, it's a tree. It'll come to me. It's one of the native understory trees. And I can't think of the name. Which one?
Not the plum.
No, I got that one too. But anyway,
Also some red.
and then some more red buds put in as understory trees because I have my ponds and I can grow something as an understory tree. And then I planted passion vine. 1 plant. And it's all over the place now. And I had never seen those fritillaries. And I have 12 fritillaries. Just beautiful. So that was a success for me, but it does spread. Okay. Oh, let's keep that. Let me just hang on 1 sec. Okay.
I have a question.
Okay.
The frostweed and the passion vine, sun or shade?
The frostweed, where I dug it from, had been growing in a shady location.
Okay.
So I grow mine in the shade, and it grew really well last year. And I took 12 little sprouts out, and I put them in 2 other places. And they get not total shade; they get maybe half shade during the time. The passion vine is in a pretty partially shaded area, but I think it sends underground runners and then sends them up and they're coming out in the sun too. But I don't want it every. it grows
And
more.
that frostweed will come up readily from seeds. So
Does it?
get some seeds and put it on the ground.
Oh, good, good. I like to know that because some of my things come up from seed, other people have great luck or I don't. Okay, resources next. Doug Ptolemy's early research showed that oaks in the mid-Atlantic region supported 557 species of caterpillars. Nationwide, oaks supported 934 species. Kimberly Shropshire, a research assistant for Doug Ptolemy, spent a year creating a mammoth database, which is the basis of a search tool for the National Wildlife Federation Plant Finder. This picture right here is a screenshot. When you open up the website, that's what you see. And you'll notice that you can do your search for plants, or you can do it for butterflies. If you want a particular butterfly you want to get, you can search and it will tell you the plants to plant. Or you can also tag things for your own list. You can enter your zip code. Up here, there'll be a place where you'll enter your zip code, and you're provided with the next picture, which is a local listing of your species. So if
Like,
you
click on native plants.
Okay. So I clicked on native plants, and this is what I got. And it will come up for trees and shrubs, or grasses. We're going to just look at the trees and shrubs ones here. And what you're going to notice up here is we see a lot of listings. They always start with the one that is the larval host for the most species and then work their way down. The best tree is that oak. Oaks are the best. And then they have a number right there with a butterfly next to it. And it's, I know you can't see it, but it's 468 species of butterflies and moths use the oaks in our zip code, my zip code.
What is the one that website?
It's called National Wildlife Federation, and it's Plant Finder, and it's on the last reference sheet that, and I have handouts of that. Okay, so then you can go and you can say, okay, I want to click on oak. So we click on oak, this comes up, and it's going to list the top 15 butterfly species that it does. And it'll tell you over here your local species. Now, that's as far as it took it on this oaks. It just said Quercus, the genus, maybe the genus. So what I did is, if you want to see it, is I printed up this 2-page guide from Texas A&M, and it lists all of our areas, Quercus species. So you could use that to go to the nursery and say, well, I want a red oak, or I want or something from that list, rather than just going in only armed with the genus. Sometimes when you're looking online, it is difficult sometimes to get down to that shopping list that you want to have. And so, let's see. All right, that's pretty much what I want to say about that. This is another helpful link I found. It's savetenantwater.com. Somebody told me about this one, and it's great. When you go to the website, it's got all these choices that you can click on. It shows you how to create a pollinator park. It's got designs and drawings to help you work one out. It shows you these wildlife certifications, got links to things like that National Wildlife Certification. I think Audubon has one. A lot of places have them. Talk about Texas Smartscapes. You can compare design outcomes. It talks about native plants. It gives you lists of plants. It gives you places to purchase them. And this is county, so they're going to be places that you won't have access to, and helps you with identifying pollinators. So that's a nice website to try. The next one, okay, is, I love this one. It's the Lady Bird Johnson Wildflower Center. It's their website. It's wildflower.org. It's one of my favorite resources, and I'll tell you why. What I do is I keep a notebook, and whenever I plant something in my yard, I go to the Lady Bird Johnson website. And you can't see this, but it's, you can look at it later. And I look at that plan and I print off for my own reference the information that's on that website. And I'll tell you what, it tells you about the plant, it describes it botanically, it tells you what color are the blooms, when does it bloom, growing conditions, tells you about water use, it tells you about light requirements, so you can compare it to your own area that you're going to plant in, soil moisture, conditions. Like this one is bloom mist. It says bloom mist flower is good as a border plant or as a colonizing ground cover. So you could use that if you have acreage, you might want to have a ground cover of it. The fluffy edged flowers are a magnet for late season butterflies. I find it works all seasons. It also spreads quickly and can become a pest. So it gives you information that you would want to know before you go to the trouble of planting something in your yard. But here's what I love. It's got benefits for wildflower. For wildlife, it attracts bees and butterflies. Is it a nectar source? Yes, it will tell you. If they know if it's a special value to like native bees or something, they'll tell you that. And when they know it, they'll tell you if it's deer resistant. And for me, that's such a lifesaver. It doesn't always, you can't always go by that. People say dairy, American beautyberry, and they don't bother mine. But they eat everything else. So I put this information up and I keep it because for me, it's just an absolutely invaluable resource to look back and check on. And it's also an inventory of what I've got in my yard, just because I didn't. If I find a plant on the National Wildlife Federation, it recommends one of those species for me, and I don't know what that plant is. Then I open up another tab on the computer and I go view. And they only have native plants on this website. So that tells me I'm looking at a native. If I find it on there, it's a native. And then I can go and get all that information to figure out, oh, okay, that'll work in my yard, because not everything will. Maybe you can't have a 50-foot tree in that space, but you can have a shrub. So you get that kind of information, and that's really, really helpful. Okay, here's things that I've chosen in my example, my yard. These are Mexican buckeye. That was the tree, so I couldn't think of it. Mexican buckeye. These are trees that are mostly understory trees on account of I already have those groves and I already have those pecan trees. So you can see that I've gotten these. For shrubs, I put in wax myrtle and American beautyberry. I'm going to put another beautyberry in my front yard. Vines, I put in the coral honeysuckle. That's my other coral honeysuckle. I had an arch in my yard and I just planted one plant. It's great. It offers a lot of shelter for animals, insects like it, and the hummingbirds. And then my Virginia creeper and my purple passion flower. Because I have deer and I still want some of these trees, I do plant them and we put cages in them. I hate it, but it keeps them from either eating them or rubbing their antlers on them and just breaking them when they're little. Maybe some of them will get bigger and I can take the cages off. Okay. These are flowers that I've chosen. So many of my pictures have that bloom list in them. I gotta tell you, everybody loves it. But here are the ones that I've been trying. I had a lot of trouble with milkweed. I tried buying the seed and I tried broadcasting it one method and I tried doing it in the refrigerator and nothing grew. Somebody gave me a flat of milkweeds this year. They're either green milkweed or emerald corn, I don't remember which, native, and little bitty ones, and I planted them and I probably got about 60% of them to make it, and one of them even has a flower right now. So if you can find someone to help, maybe you'll have luck. But milkweed is excellent pollinating plant, as well as being a larval for monarchs. But I had good luck with my bee balm. And I did not have good luck with gay feather, but I had good luck with Indian blanket. Frostwood great. I just started, Sarah gave me some goldenrod this year and it's doing really well. And goldenrod, I'll tell you more about goldenrod in a few minutes. So anyway, those are some of the ones that I've enjoyed. Others have shown up in my yard and I don't mind them there. Dandelions, I like dandelions. Henbit, the henbit comes up in the yard early, and we have looked out and seen moths on it in the early spring, all pollinating across the front yard. Just it's wonderful. 10-petal anemone. I don't know if any of you see that one. It's a pretty little one. And Brazos pencil show up. Thanks, Dave. Okay. Now we were talking about a lot of these plants are great for larval hosts, and I really look hard to plant things that work as a larval host. But we also want to have bees. It's a different consideration when you're planting for bees. Butterflies and moths, larval. Bees, we look for what feeds bees, which is nectar and pollen. There are two types of bees out there. There are general bees, which will just go to every flower. Just no problem. Whatever you've got out there, they'll check it out. And then there's specialists. The specialists are very particular. So when you look at a list of flowers, if you can plant for the specialists, you're also covering the generals, because generals will go there too. So if you try to heavy load on the ones that go for specialists, then that's a really good a good thing to do. I think the next, let's see, what's the next slide after this one? Okay, no, go back. There are many of the bees families. If you plant bees for bees, they are also what butterflies seem to like to. These are mostly all good butterfly larval plants as well, and they're also good pollinator plants for them too. One of the things that when I'm selecting plants, I look to find out if they're cultivars. The people who make these cultivars have started with some native stock, and then they have bred varieties. And these varieties are bred for our preferences. If you go look at a native rose and smell that lovely, beautiful scent, and then you go and you look at all the varieties of propagated roses, sometimes you notice that they don't have any smell. It's because perhaps they were bred for disease resistance, or they were bred for a big, beautiful bloom, and it didn't bring across the scent. Well, a lot of the cultivars don't carry as nutritious or even any of that same food source for the bees. Some of them do, but you can't find on a label if they have a nice full complement of food, or if you're putting out something that's a plastic buffet for them. So I tend to look for the native variety, and sometimes you have to ask. Is this the original one? Look at the scientific name on the label, and that can be a bit of help. All right, let's move to goldenrod. Goldenrod is in the genus Solidago, and I'm going to read to you what Doug Tallamy says about goldenrod, because this thing is great. The genus Solidago is without a doubt one of nature's greatest gifts to animals. The goldenrods collectively are one of the best group of plants for our native bees, because so many have specialized on its pollen. And it also provides nectar and pollen for our generalist bees, just what we were talking about. Across the United States, Solidago is the top ranked genus in terms of hosting the ecologically valuable caterpillars that feed our breeding birds and our fall migrant birds, including 181 species of caterpillars, and produces the seeds on which our winter bird residents feed, as well as the voles and mice that feed the hawks, the owls, the weasels, the coyotes, and foxes. Goldenrod roots are thick and intertwined, and they not only prevent erosion, but they actively build topsoil and encourage rainwater infiltration rather than stormwater runoff. This is one genius. It's pretty good influence. He also said that goldenrod looks like ragweed. Goldenrod does not make you sneeze, as its pollen grains aren't large and sticky and don't float in the air. So it's not going to make it worse for people like me with allergies. Okay. Leaving it messy is a concept that I'd like to talk about a little bit. It's an important concept. In the past, when you'd read garden advice in magazines or articles, we talk about how fall and winter are such a great month to tidy up that garden. Get rid of those leaves, break them up, send them off, burn them, and cut off anything dead, all those perennials, get rid of the tops of those perennials, just clean up your yard. It's, to me, it's just like the concept of that sterile, perfect green manicured lawn, which the advertisers sold us on and had to be perfect, and you had to spend all this money on fertilizers and insecticides and mowing it and making noise pollution, and it's not supporting anything out there. It's just green. And for me, it's a boring little part of my yard. I still have some, which is the reason I'll say I want some, but I don't want that just sea of green. Little consideration, all those years was given to the life that's missing from all that yard. Leaving it messy refers to the idea that our yards can and should be full of life. We're not separate from nature. We depend on it, and we can and we should be part of it. When we let our leaves remain on the ground, we are giving shelter to insects, including butterflies, moths, bees. Lots of animals use leaf litter to spend the winter. Decomposing leaves allow nutrients to enter the soil and retain moisture. If you have a hard time just leaving them all over your yard, I get it. You can rake them up. We just rake them up and we push them into all the flower gardens and flower beds. Or if I've got a place that I'm trying to stop the grass from growing, pile them up and create a big mulch on that, and it'll help mulch and let them decompose. You can rake them neatly around the base of the tree without getting rid of it. When you leave those uncut perennials, those dry sticks with the seed heads that are still sitting there after the leaves are falling off, leave them over winter and the birds will come and land on them and eat those seeds all winter. The stems dry out and are hollow, and the native bees go down into those stems, and that's where they lay a lot of their eggs. So you're providing bee habitat for those. They can make a home in those little hollow stems. If you feel like, I saw a nice note that someone put out. She didn't really like the look of all those seed heads just all over her yard kind of randomly. So she took and cut them off, and they're beautiful dried seed heads. She put them in vases around her yard, outdoor vases. Birds can still nest on them, but she organized it. So it gave her some sort of aesthetic that she liked. Or you could take those stems. Ours kind of, some of the bigger, tall, like this tall coneflower we have falls over. So we just leave those stems laying in a nice little neat row over there. Insects can use those then. And they're still there. During the growing season, I let my vegetable plants and mine that I don't eat and my herbs go to seed. And maybe it doesn't look like this neat, but the insects pollinate on those flowers. Crazy. Carrots and carrot flowers. They're gorgeous. They make a beautiful cut base flower. Just let them grow. Basil. Absolutely adore my basil flowers. So I just let those go. Okay. Next. Not too long. Okay. Birds, like all other mammals, need water, food, and shelter to survive. I've planted enough hummingbird attractive plants so far that I no longer supplement with feeders. They can go to my flowers. I don't have to put them. I'll never get enough seeds for my birds, but I did it for the numbers. I grow, my Candace. I'm sorry. No, I know you have to get to the airport. That's fine. I grow many plants specifically for birds and mammals. I hang bird feeders, especially in the winter. I maintain a brush pile for shelter. A lot of the birds go in there. I'm not sure what else. Birds all fly into that brush pile. I don't use pesticides except for fire ants. We'll put Andro right on the fire ant mound. And I don't use any, I have never, since I moved into my yard, used fertilizer on my grass, ever. And it doesn't look a lot different when it's mowed than anyone else's yard. And I live in a neighborhood full of pecan trees, and the orchard always used to aerial spray all that stuff. And then they quit doing that. And people hire companies to come in and spray and kill all those bugs and realize I get as many pecans as the rest of them, and I don't do it. It's just poison and money and time. And I've never seen the benefit of doing that. The only fertilizer that I do use is for my fruit trees. I push some fertilizer stakes under my fruit trees, but I have never even treated them for a pre-emergence or any of that stuff that they call for. It's wonderful fruit. I get a lot of species because I don't poison everything in my yard. And I'm a photographer, so I take pictures of everything that I get in my yard. You're welcome to look at this later. My sister made me this cute little cover for it. And I take a picture of them and I put them in my little book and I identify them. I only put them in if I've identified them. And to identify them, I use iNaturalist or Field Guide, something like that. And you can see I've absolutely worn this book out. She made me another one because I've gotten, thank you, Ardia. I've gotten so many species, as you can see. So far identified. I mean, I've had 39 species of butterflies and moths, and I haven't even gone out at night for the night moths, like the mothing, because I know I could double that. 5 different species of bees, and so I'm seeing a lot of things in my yard that I think other people may not be seeing. They're not out there like me looking, but I think I'm seeing a lot more in my yard because I'm offering them the habitat that they really want. I judge my success by all these species and also when I'm in my yard, I can hear the bees buzzing in the garden. I always read that in old novels. Somebody sits there and read one of these older novels, and they listen to the insects buzzing. And I thought that was missing for a long time. And now I sit out there, and I can hear my bees buzzing. And then, thank you, Tim, for that bluebird house right there that you built me. It successfully raised that three broods of bluebirds in there. So I see, knowing how many caterpillars that took, I think I'm having a really good success in my yard. Okay. This is the same drawing again. And the green just shows that I'm working on expanding my gardens. And you'll notice that I'm not trying to fill it all the way in. I don't have a problem with some grass. If I had it to do over again and it was brand new empty lot, it would be some sort of a buffalo grass or one of those grasses that are developed that don't need the watering and things as much, but I have what I have. And I like to walk around my yard and I need paths to walk on. And if my kids bring their dogs, they need a place for the dogs to go. And of course, they have somewhere to play cornhole. So I like to have some lawn. And so you can see the kind of choices that I made. Now, I spend a lot of time in my yard. I've spent a lot of effort to do what I've done. That said, you don't have to go to this kind of effort, and you still can make a huge change make a big, big difference. Okay, just with small different things that you can do. And I'm going to mention these things, and then I'm going to repeat them again, because I think they're really important. I'm going to repeat them again in just a minute. When you go out to buy a new plant for your yard, if you simply take the time to consider, is this native? Is this a cultivar? Is it invasive? Just making a decision like that can make a big difference. Even more specifically, does this particular flowering plant that I want attract a lot of species, or does it only attract one? So you can make educated decisions that make a big difference. You can, if you have just a little small area, you could do this in a potted plant. You can do this on a balcony. You can add something that attracts native species. For instance, you think, well, I live up on the, in a city. You live up on the 10th floor, the 15th floor, my balcony looks out. Would I be able to attract a monarch in there? Monarchs have been seen, they like the winds when they're going down to Mexico. They like to use those winds coming in from the north, and they ride them because flapping the whole way was just brutal. And they are often hundreds of feet up in the air. And Dave, what was that one? Was it that a monarch was spotted by a glider pilot at 11,000 feet once? The insects are up there. When we fly in his plane, we find them on our windshield after we've been flying around up high. So you can attract things, doesn't have to be ground level. So don't let that stop you. A little bit of effort multiplied by all those thousands of people out there in homegrown national park who are on there now, it can make a really big difference. It can make that enough people who can create that hotspot of interconnectedness. And I want to say that let's go to that next slide. These are the last important points. First of all, we can make a huge difference if we just stop using pesticides indiscriminately. It would make a huge difference. They kill whatever they touch. So use something very directed if you have. If you have an invasive species in your yard, yank it out and put something native in. Just substitute. This was the one I was just telling you about. Think about using native plants whenever you go to buy something new. It's not too big of a thing to do that makes a big change. And then leave some of those leaves in your yard. That's an easy one. Push them over to the side and let them stay. And then some people say, well, it's so overwhelming. It's such a task ahead of us. And Dave has this book that he always loves to use in a situation like this. He says, no individual raindrop ever thinks that it is responsible for the flood. So I think that's kind of a nice. Okay. Thank you very much. Those are the references. And if you want, I've got a few handouts where you can take a picture of those. Oak trees, I put that, different species of oak trees. If you want to get a copy of that, that's fine. If you're looking for an oak tree, there are also some top 10 type plant lists and things over there, but if you want to get something like that. Yes, Malia?
I have a question. How often do you water?
It really depends on the plantings. I have a sprinkler system and I run that, and the sprinkler system is always set so that everything doesn't die. So enough to keep things alive. I don't care if my grass gets, ground looking or whatever, but for my fruit trees, I water a little more because I'm eating those. And then, for instance, the sprinkler, when we were gone for a month in summer when it was hot, we got back and I noticed my blue mist wasn't looking a little, no blooms. Well, monarchs are coming. So I got out there and watered it by hand a lot and got those blooms back. And then I'll slow down and just not overwater it. So I play that, I watch things to see. I try to go with as little watering as I can. Most of the natives are very adaptive. They're adapted to this area. So unless they're bog plants or something, they can take a lot less watering.
And when do you plant? You have a special
I follow the regular advice. They say fall and winter are good for trees and shrubs. Trees and shrubs get their roots a chance to get going before they get stressed by all that heat. And then the flowers, when I order seeds for something like Native American seeds, they tell you if it's a fall planting or a spring planting or both. So I just follow that out. If they say, like if you notice bluebonnets, you start to see the little bluebonnets coming up each fall, the little rosettes on the ground. So you would want to get those out in the fall. And the seed companies are really good about telling you when is the best time to do that. And then if I'm going to go buy from the nursery, availability. I don't do it much of anything in the dead of summer.
So the northern line, like one I'm specifically interested in.
I would have to go to the seed packets and read the information. I was given,
Right, and so
Doug.
you were given a shot of golden.
it goes right in the ground.
Right.
And water it, even if it's hot in summer, I'm gonna do my best to get it to make it. Oh, yeah. I just asked someone not to give it to me. I'm gonna go away for a month.
Right.
Then it doesn't make it. It's my fault.
How do the pollinators find your flowers if there's not anybody nearby that also gardens? Is it like, do they smell it or do they have to see it or?
I wonder about that, especially with monarchs, but our neighborhood may not have a lot of native plants, but it has a lot of flowers.
Yeah.
And pollinators are looking for nectar,
Oh,
and they're
okay.
going to find it in all these other flowers. They're not going to find it perhaps as a nice nutrition packet as a native plant would offer them. But if they find it here and then they find it there, they probably will work their way. And then I imagine that a lot of mine, since they have found mine, they're reproducing in my yard, and then they're coming back. It's like I know my my passion flower does that with fritillaries, because I got little fritillary caterpillars all over. So it's a repeating cycle right there in my yard.
Can I comment on that?
Yes.
I got some blue mist and planted it by my mailbox. There's nothing. No other blue mist, hardly any flowers anywhere. As soon as they started blooming, I had queen butterflies. It's like I had never seen a queen in my yard for years before that. As soon as it came up,
Yeah.
they found it.
Well, yeah.
So I can't answer that. I
Yeah.
don't know how they actually
Because I
detect
like
it.
more, I've also got blue mist and it's in the shade and it had like 3 blooms this summer. And I had at one point 18 queens just hanging out
Yeah.
playing.
The queens
And that's
adore it.
Dead flowers, they're just hanging out.
Yes.
every day.
Yeah, and remember there's distinction between, a lot of these flowering plants, which are good for them to nectar,
Yeah,
with the host plant, which is what their eggs need and caterpillars need to develop. So we see like the Vidalias, which are not native, that attract all kinds of bees. And the same thing
Flies, everybody.
same thing with the thorny olive. And there's a lot of plants that you can buy, which create myrtles. There's a lot of insects that go to create myrtles. But so they can get some food source from it, but that necessarily will not support the reproduction. And then I think there's just, I don't know, I was 1 or 2. It's a sense of small, but somehow they find it.
yeah.
You put it out there and they come.
you know, they have the moths can find a pheromones for the, in the mating, and it's the tiniest bit of, their sensory organs, just, I know they're super, but I haven't seen anything where it really explains that.
And then another question, American bumblebees. They live in the ground? Or where do they, because I've got a lot of them, I've had them.
I
on
do too. I would have to look it up because in my yard, for bees, a lot of bees are dig a hole in the ground.
Yeah,
And if you leave little areas bare in your garden, back in a garden somewhere, you'll see all the little holes where they're going under there to nest. Whether it's that American bumblebee or not, I'd have to, I can ask Valerie, she knows
Yeah.
more about bees. Or I can look it up or something, but,
they're not in hives. Bumblebees.
there are, and the hives that some of the other hive species might be 20 or 30 in a hive. That's it. None of our native bees do like the big European bumblebees and have those humongous ones. And I think some of them nest in logs and under leaves and in twigs and those hollow stems, the solitary. And I don't know if the bumblebee is, I just don't know much about the actual species. Yes.
How did you remove your fragrance?
I'm still removing them and we've been there about 15 years. We cut it off, he took an axe and he chopped it down and it sprouts up every year, many times. Now, the ones that we removed from that one little strip, we dug and we dug and we dug, and I didn't get much water anyway because this is right up against the hanger in the driveway. This is little tiny bed, and they finally went away. But the one in the front, I'm still getting rid of it. I don't want to put a lot of poison on this stuff. I don't, so I just deal with it year after year. People.
I'm just really, intrigued by the number of different pollinators that you have spotted in your yard. And the fact that you know, identified them and numbered them, and you have all this information. So how do you do that? I mean, you know, there's a lot of talk about sit spots. We go out and we sit for something that minutes a day and we begin to become aware of what's around us. Do you have a routine that you use to go out and begin to notice all of these things?
It's my camera. I'm a photographer and I'll go out and think, oh, I think I'm gonna go out and weed today. I'm not out there 5 minutes, I go, whoa, and I have to run in the house and get my camera and I spend the next hour not reading. It's one of my things that I like to do. And I like putting those things on my naturalist and I like making lists. So that's just sort of me. And then I also like to do artwork from my photographs. So for me, I just want to know how many things are in there. I just do it. I do those things just for me. Yes.
If we have someone else who would like to be able to hear this, we go to the African Nature Center website.
Yes.
Where
And when you go to the question is to see this on the Act of Nature website. Go to the Act of Nature website and look for, I think it's under the programs tab and then past programs. And you go to a link and there's just whatever ones have been recorded are on that link. This one will show up
It may take a
in
few days.
a few days. One of our group will get it edited and stuff and put it on there.
Just wanted to mention, I thought it was a good idea. I found this online where instead of in the country, there people are giving out little seeds.
For a milkweed seeds. That's really nice. I would hope that they would put a lot of instructions in. Maybe some other seeds they might find would be more, the kids who planted them might have better success. Because milkweed's a tough one. If you don't, I don't get it. But, I think it's nice to offer something besides sugar.
For baby showers, I've been getting, people getting ready for it.
I think it's a great idea. When my daughters were born, my parents got each of them a tree and we planted it in the front yard of the house we lived in. You know, those kind of things are so thoughtful. I like that.
50th anniversary, bag of seeds.
Yeah, there you go. 50 seeds. One for each year.
There you go.
I used to put hummingbird feeders up, but I have now my coral honeysuckle, my flamacanthus, my tropical sage. And then my red yucca, I have enough hummingbird plants that bloom. And they also they'll go up to my big sunflower and they'll pick spiders off it, little insects. They want a little bit of protein too. So they'll check out a few other plants that you go. That wasn't in the hummingbird list of plants, but they do. So I don't have to do that anymore. I did supplement. I started with hummingbird feeders. Oh yeah. Yes, and you have to keep those really clean because they can get nasty and they'll make your hummingbirds fail. Yeah, plant tubular, the red tubular flowers, because you think of their long bill, it's adapted to go in there and those tubular flowers to get the nectar. Any more? Well, thank you all so much for coming out. Hope you enjoyed it.
We need to really come to that table and share this.
Yes. Do you want to tell me about it? I speeched them up. I thought we didn't have the table system. We're just gonna move this back, but we're kind of proud of it. Oh, thank you. We're just gonna